Hello everybody and welcome back to another War Thunder video. Today we're doing a review on the BMP-1, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce in Russian. This is a Soviet era infantry fighting vehicle which was amphibious, although technically it's also an APC because it can carry, troops. That's what these holes in the side are for and the periscopes on the top. It's so that troops in the rear of the tank can poke their barrel of their AK-47 out and shoot at enemy targets as they drive past. These vehicles were exported through numerous different nations during the period of its prime, many of which are still in service today with various different African nations. There were some in Iraq during the first Gulf War in 1991, and I'm sure there are still tons and tons out there in eastern countries now. Right, so let's start with the stat card. Rank 6, battle rating 7.3. This tank is armed with a 73mm 2A28 cannon with 40 rounds of ammunition. It is an auto-loader, but we'll get to that in a minute because that's quite important. And 4 9M14 anti-tank guided missiles, as well as a 7.62 PKT machine gun with 1,000 rounds in the coaxial. Turret rotation speed of 12.5 degrees per second, -5 degrees of gun depression, 30 degrees of elevation, and a reload rate of 6 seconds. This does not change so long as you are using the auto-loading version, regardless of crew skill. Armour we will get to in a minute, although it's basically, as best can be described, as wet tissue paper. A mass of 13 tons with a 265 horsepower engine propels this thing to a max speed of 65 kilometers an hour. I haven't managed to do that speed yet, but there is no doubt in my mind that it will go that fast on tarmac. A maximum inclination of 31 degrees with a 70% visibility and a max repair cost of 3,500 lions in the current state that this thing's in. It's stock, but I feel comfortable enough to be able to say that this is a review of this vehicle purely from the few games I've played, and we'll get to that in the gameplay. 200% reward for RP and 150% reward for lions. So let's go into the modifications before we have a look at what you may consider armour. This thing is armed with 2 shells only. These are rifle grenades, believe it or not. PG9, which is a heat shell. 300mm of penetration. Pretty good, I think you'll agree, although very, very low velocity because it's a short-barreled 73mm gun. And high explosive. Next to useless, so I don't even carry any of those. The ATGM itself has a penetration of 400mm on flat armour at any range, and on a 30-degree angle of, give or take, 1mm, 200mm of penetration at a 30-degree angle at any range. So let's have a look at the quote-unquote armour. This is where it gets funny. Crap, 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 more crap. Gun breech is 33mm thick, but everything, 50 caliber machine guns can penetrate this thing. Anti-air is going to be your biggest threat in this vehicle, not other tanks. 80mm, 4mm, crap, 16mm. 16mm. So this is really thick armour, right? The doors at the back where the troops can get into. No, actually, it's a fuel tank. So if there were a crew inside of this thing, if anything was to shoot you in the ass, all of the crew would be showered in burning fuel and everybody would die a horrific death. This is also a fuel tank right in the centre where the crew is supposed to stand. Excellent. Carousel on the bottom for loading the rifle grenades with an auto-loader, and the engine and transmission is in the front. You would think that this would block rounds and stop it from killing the crew that you do have. Unfortunately, you would be wrong, because most people at this battle rating are firing Sabo, and nobody will have the time to swap to HE just for the sake of shooting at this tank. So, let's get into the gameplay footage, shall we? So, here's the gameplay footage. We are on the Battle of Hurtgen Forest in my BMP, obviously. Previously, when I was trying to get footage in this tank, I spawned in my T-64 first and then used the BMP as a backup. In this game though, I decided to be a bit more ballsy and used the BMP first. So, I mentioned in the hangar that this thing gets an auto-loader, but there's a bit of a catch.
You get a 6-second reload rate with the autoloader, but without the autoloader, when you add the modification to improve the ATGM, turning this thing into the BMP-1P, it removes the autoloader from the main gun, giving you around a 12-second reload rate rather than a 6-second reload rate, so you get double the reload rate. But this does mean that the ATGM is wire guided as the standard one is, but you can use your mouse, or in my case the right analog stick, as opposed to the WAS and D keys to control the ATGM in flight. And you can fire the ATGM on the move. Not that you would ever want to, because that's going to make your time a lot more difficult when it comes to bringing it to bear on its target. Whenever I do fire the ATGM in this vehicle, I fire it from a standing still anyway, so it doesn't really matter in my opinion, although I came to the conclusion that it would probably be best to keep the standard ATGM and the faster reload rate, just because you will need the faster reload rate, because if you're firing an ATGM, the chances are you're firing it from soft cover, i.e. through bushes and camouflage, to reduce the chances of anybody seeing you. You will also be firing it at long range, meaning it's harder for them to hit you. Okay? If you go for the BMP-1P modification, though, you're going to be firing the ATGM from the same circumstances, but should you run into a tank at close range, you're going to need the fastest reload rate you can have in order to reliably keep putting shots out, assuming that you don't get killed straight away, because you're going to be in closer quarters because you're using the gun. I hope that rant made sense. Well, it makes sense to me. Whether it will make sense to you will be, well, subject to your opinion, of course. So what am I doing in this match? I am not, I repeat, not going in close quarters. I am going as far afield as I possibly can and trying to scout enemy tanks. This is one of the few occasions where I wish I had the scout mechanic or the spotting mechanic that you get in World of Tanks, because it meant that I would have some use. Due to the lack of armour, tissue paper, on the BMP-1, there's not much point in just driving straight forward into the enemy position, because they will just gun you down. This is very much a scout vehicle in this regard. It's a support vehicle, it's not a tank. It is an infantry fighting vehicle. Soviet doctrine meant that all troops, this goes for the East German army as well, were motorized, meaning they didn't have to carry as much kit on them because they weren't walking everywhere. They had armor personnel carriers supported by tanks in order to escort them. Excuse me, that was my phone. This would mean that the BMP needed to be capable of taking out tanks as well. This is why these things were such a threat to NATO tank commanders, because of the ATGMs that they carried, although they only carry 4. There's so little room in the vehicle that you wouldn't be able to fit any more in, whilst still being able to fit not only the crew, but any troops you happen to be carrying as well. Once the vehicle got into combat, the troops would get out, and the ATGMs would be put to good use should enemy tanks turn up to the field. Of course, this is how it was supposed to work. In a game, though, it's not always so black and white. I am being incredibly cautious in this vehicle. I don't want to get spotted, because if I get spotted, I am dead. A BMP that is notified as a target is a dead BMP, in War Thunder at the very least. The armour would protect you from small arms fire, but in this case, because there are no infantry, there is no small arms fire, and even the KPZ and the MBT are armed with 20mm autocannons as opposed to 50 caliber machine guns, which will tear this thing a new arsehole. Most of you are going to be wondering why I didn't take that shot at the Leopard A1A1, and the answer is quite simple. I've never fired this gun at an enemy vehicle at this point. I'm still uncomfortable due to the incredibly low velocity of the rounds that it fires, or rather the grenades I should say, that I daren't risk taking a shot and missing. The good thing to do right now would be to inform the enemy team that there is a vehicle in B, although they should be well aware of this because he has captured the point and there is a massive smoke cloud from where he's trying to conceal his position. I keep on the lookout for enemy tanks, anything that I can shoot at. I want to try and go for vehicles that are already preoccupied with with my team's vehicles, before increasing the risk to only being the target that they have in their sights at the time. This may seem incredibly predatory, using my vehicles, or my team's vehicles rather, as bait just so that I have the opportunity to pull off a shot, but you kind of have to play this thing in that way. If you were squadded up, say for example when I squad up with Schooter, if one of us was in a main battle tank, the T-64, and the other one of us was in the BMP, we could use that to mutually support one another. Whoever's in the BMP can scout up ahead and, using chat, inform the other player who is in the main battle tank where the enemy vehicles are, which makes them prepared for it. But because team play is not particularly fond in War Thunder amongst the community, unfortunately, although there are rare occasions where this does happen, you can't really rely on this, and you can't be in open chat with everybody because chances are they'll just ignore you anyway. So what are my views on this tank? As I said, you need to play it passively as much as possible. Should the opportunity arise for you to use the weapon, do so. Otherwise, it becomes more dangerous as the game goes on. Where there are less enemy vehicles moving around on the battlefield, this thing becomes a much more viable option. Which is why I would personally recommend taking it as a backup vehicle and prioritising your main battle tank as the first vehicle you spawn in. I know there's a Gepard in that field somewhere, but he's in a divot in the ground and I can't quite see him. Although there is also a KPZ out in that field, which I will get the opportunity to shoot at soon. Bit of a spoiler, I only get one kill in this vehicle, and using the opportunity to get the kill is what brings my game to a premature end. And now we'll get to witness the very, very, very low velocity ATGM in action. As you can see, that KPZ is preoccupied with another target. It's been tracked, so I take my opportunity. But unfortunately, that leads to me getting spotted. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see more, please like, share and subscribe for some more, and I'll see you guys in the next War Thunder video.